I read 7 books in July plus 3 volumes of a manga, and today we're going to do some old-fashioned book reviews for all of them. And hey, it was a pretty doggone good month. According to Storygraph stats, the books that I finished contained 3,400 pages, not counting the manga. We have a mix of genres, but I lean pretty heavily towards nonfiction this month, which I'll get into, and our average rating was right around 4 stars. I am taking that every time, and I would love to know how your reading month went. And while you're at it, tell me the best book that you read in July, because I can do some research on it and then maybe add it to my TBR. And of course, while you're here, likes, shares, subs, ringing the bell, all that stuff is appreciated, but as always, not required. And check out all of my other efforts on my other platforms with the links in the description, including my Bindery community, which now has over 300 subscribers, which is amazing. We have a great time chatting in our Discord. And for my money, we have the best and most well-rounded book recommendations in the game, if you're into that kind of thing. Oh, and I also made this stack of books that I'm going to talk about today into a shoppable list on my Amazon storefront if you want to go buy them. If you'd rather get them from somewhere else like bookshop.org, that stack will also be posted on my Bindery, and you can choose between Amazon and bookshop.org when you click on the book. So you've got options there. All right, let's not stand on ceremony. Let's start the show. I probably should do this lowest to highest rated for watch time analytics, but who cares about that? You definitely don't. I want to talk about the best books that I read first, and then we'll work down to the lowest rated book that I read in July, and I'll talk about the manga volumes that I read as a bonus at the very end. Let's boogie. I had 1 5-star read in July after having none in June, so I'm not going to shut up about this one anytime soon. Africa is Not a Country, Notes on a Bright Continent by Deepo Faloyin. A series of videos I do is designed to introduce people to various countries and civilizations throughout history. And one request that I always get in the comments is Africa, which is hard because the way it's asked makes it seem like it's a country. Like, are you talking about Zimbabwe or the Congo or Ghana or one of the other 54 fully recognized countries, 2 independent states, and several territories? You might even be talking about like the more ancient civilizations like Carthage or Egypt has a long history. And that's why it's tough to find a book that captures the essence and history of Africa. I mean, today there's more than 200 ethnicities and 2,000 languages being spoken between 1.4 billion people. It's way more diverse than you'd think, which this book explains in brilliant detail. This starts with the Berlin Conference in 1884, where the scramble for Africa begins, leading to the conquering and mutilation of the continent, mixing cultures and ethnicities their colonizers did not understand together, and shoving them into imaginary borders. And it explores how these irregular bursts have ramifications still today. And it puts under a microscope how seemingly well-meaning Western charities that deliberately omit scenes of cities, wealth, culture, and thriving communities serve to make Africa continue to look primitive with a desperate need for foreign intervention. Coney 2012 is a prime example of this and why these efforts often do more harm than good, when in reality, we have examples of Africans doing it on their own, and we should be looking to support those efforts, not create new situations that encourage foreign intervention. And I do want to note and be clear about this, that Faloyin does not shy away from talking about dictators that have taken advantage of the turmoil created by the conditions inherent to artificial states before mapping out how those exploitable conditions can be removed through action. Faloyin also takes a look at how literature and film have played a role in how Africans are portrayed, taking movies like The Good Lie, I think anyway, to task while breaking down what made Black Panther so exceptional. This is brimming with insight, and unlike a lot of books you find on this topic, it's not just a list of horrors. In addressing the stereotypes, smashing them, and then showing the real picture, it showcases the brilliance that can be found all over the continent if you, as Faloyin says, quote, engage with the continent as it actually exists, not with an idea, but with its genuine form, end quote. Take him up on his offer. Get this, read this, it bangs. Another banger that I read in July was Hero of Two Worlds, the Marquis de Lafayette in the Age of Revolution by Mike Duncan. And yes, this is the same Mike Duncan from the History of Rome podcast and Revolutions podcast. He wrote The Storm Before the Storm, which was a great slice of Roman history, talking about the run-up to the fall of the Roman Republic, going back to the Gracchi brothers. Now, I have already reviewed this in 2 other places. The first was a written review exclusive for my Bindery subscribers. They got that pretty quickly after I finished this, so you can become a member there if you want to read that whole thing. And I also reviewed it on my short form platforms later in the month. So let's just air that puppy to see what I had to say about it in a more abbreviated format. Lafayette played major roles in the American and French revolutions. He rubbed elbows with all the major players of the day like George Washington and Napoleon. He was the Forrest Gump of the age, and Duncan gives an incredibly balanced portrayal of his relationships, contradictions, and achievements. This is perfect for somebody like me that isn't the most informed on either revolution, so while you don't get the fully fleshed out and detailed rundown of either, because we are experiencing these events through Lafayette's involvement, it has still given me a base of knowledge that I need to tackle more complex works. It's also excellent for beginner or casual history readers that want to check the temperature of the water before fully diving in. It is very accessible to a general audience. And look, I really enjoyed his book, The Storm Before the Storm, which focused on the decline of the Roman Republic. But Duncan has leveled up as a writer since that debut. The pacing was better, the end of chapter cliffhangers were well executed, it's detailed enough while still retaining the conversational charm that make his podcast so successful. My only minor criticism is there was a feeling of distance between myself and Lafayette, but overall this is still 4 3/4 stars. Highly recommend it, and I look forward to getting my hands on his next book, which I think is supposed to be about the Roman crisis of the 3rd century. Can't wait to get to that one too. Also coming in at 4 3/4 stars, we're going to switch up genres here. Let's talk about Speaking Bones, the 4th and final book of the Silk Punk Fantasy series by Ken Liu that I've been obsessed with all year. I've already talked a bunch about this series, and it's tough to talk about books deep into the series without giving away any spoilers, but I'm going to try my best here. And there are some major takeaways that I have that should be safe to listen to. First, you better be a damn good writer with a damn good plot and damn good characters to get me invested enough to read a series that checks in at a total of roughly 3,500 pages. And you can check those boxes because I enjoyed the ever-loving hell out of this series on the whole, from stem to stern. Second, I have some hard thinking to do on this, but I think this would easily crack my top 10 fantasy series for sure. And then probably in that 4 to 6 ranking range overall. So this is like top tier stuff compared to the other stuff that I've read. Third, of the fantasy I've read, this might be the most balanced and well-rounded of them all. When you talk about the combination of plot, characters, action, dialogue, political scheming, philosophy, religion, technical advancements that explain the fantasy elements. Liu has so many tools in his toolbox, and he's so incredibly skilled with each one. And hey, going back to the first point, if I'm going to invest that much time in something, you better stick the damn landing. This did that. And while I still think book 2, The Wall of Storms, is clearly the best in the series, it's basically a perfect fantasy book. Speaking Bones was the most emotional for me, and we tied up all these loose threads and brought to a close the story of these characters that I've grown so attached to perfectly. It hit me hard from so many different angles, and I was on the edge of my seat for all the 1,000+ pages. That is how you end a series. So bravo to Ken Liu for pulling off a masterpiece from bell to bell. Check out the Dandelion Dynasty. It's well worth it. Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove would fall somewhere around here in the ranking, as I feel it was like a 4-star or 4 1/4 star book. But full disclosure, this is from a fellow bindery imprint, Easy Cat Press, which is run by Jason's community. I got to meet Jason at BookNet Fest in May, and he's just like an incredible human. And of course, I have a vested interest in bindery succeeding because I have my own imprint with them, and I will be publishing a book in fall 2026. All this means that I have a clear bias. So I'm going to lean on my community for the review here because they don't carry that same level of bias as I do. And this was a book that they voted on to read in July. They voted on it. So I have plenty to pull from here. First, let's establish what this is. And that's kind of hard because this is a genre mashup where we have elements of classic science fiction mixed with space fantasy, mixed with pulp horror. And it all takes place in space, and we are on board with an AI who operates a passenger shuttle between Earth and Alpha Centauri. And yes, if you're getting Murderbot vibes, you'd be correct. So if you like Murderbot, this might be for you. Now, the passengers on this ship, the human passengers, start dying in ways that cannot be explained but it probably has something to do with like Dracula being on board. I'm just going to stop there with the plot because it just gets wackier with the different things that end up on the ship. So this is more fun than serious, but it's all underscored by like this very straightforward AI POV. So you get like this mix of like logic driven sarcasm, but there's also this underlying emotional growth throughout. And for me, and again, recognizing my bias, it was unique, chaotic, surprisingly heartfelt. I dug it a lot. And the community aggregate rating was over 4 stars. So the shared feeling in our club was that it definitely picked up in the second half, and that buoyed their appreciation of it. And this review blurb comes from one of our folk, quote, "This book was just what I needed. I think I would even consider it a bit of a slump buster. It's fresh, fast-paced, and the banter between Demeter and Stewart was just delightful. This book could have gotten pretty cheesy pretty fast, but True Love somehow found a happy middle ground and wrote the best book I've read this month. Between this and Murderbot, fun sci-fi is so back." End quote. Also, speaking of the comps here, somebody else said it gave them vibes of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers, which I've heard great things about. So if you've read that and enjoyed it, you need to check out Of Monsters and Mainframes by Barbara Truelove. I'm going to talk about these next 2 books together since they're so similar. I gave 3.25 stars to The Impossible Climb, Alex Honnold, El Capitan, and The Climbing Life by Mark Sinnott. And I gave 3.5 stars to Alone on the Wall by Alex Honnold, the man himself. So it seems like once a year, I go down this rock climbing rabbit hole. I just find it utterly fascinating. And I'll rewatch documentaries like Free Solo, The Alpinist, The Dawn Wall, etc., which this happened to me again in July. And the most recognizable free solo climber, which means he's climbing without any safety equipment, by the way, is Alex Honnold. And he was the first person to free solo El Capitan, which is a 3,000-foot vertical rock face in Yosemite National Park. It's just cuckoo bonkers stuff. You have to see it. Now, what you're going to get in The Impossible Climb is Mark Sinnott's climbing experiences and his interactions in his climbs with Alex Honnold. So you get like this outsider view of Honnold along with some other adventures. This includes Alex's climb of El Cap, as it was possibly like the biggest event ever in climbing history. You're also going to get some history of climbing, which I find fascinating because you'll get into rivalries between the Valley Christians going against the Lower Sierra eating, drinking, and farsing society during the days of Yosemite's golden age of climbing in the 50s. And that rivalry went on for like over a decade. So there's a little extra juice in the squeeze to this one that I enjoyed, and it convinced me to rewatch the 2014 documentary Valley Uprising for the 4th time. Highly recommend that one. Now, Alone on the Wall, you're drinking it straight from the tap for the most part, straight from the hose. So you get inside of Alex's head and his thought process, and he's definitely a unique individual that is wired a bit differently from your average person. Like, he's got this no big deal attitude towards the riskiest climbs and pitches. And I'll be honest, he can come off a bit arrogant at times, but like, that's fine. I'm not trying to be his friend. I just want like a better understanding of how his wheels turn and how that allows him to accomplish these crazy feats. So it kind of depends on what flavor you want, or maybe you want both. I wanted both, and both serve their purpose. So yeah, I would recommend these if you're into that kind of thing. That brings us to our lowest rated book I read in July, which unfortunately was the History Book Club's pick for the month. Sorry, guys and gals. 3 Tigers, One Mountain, A Journey Through the Bitter History and Current Conflicts of China, Korea, and Japan by Michael Booth. The title is a play on a Chinese proverb that's like 2 tigers cannot share the same mountain, or one mountain cannot accommodate 2 tigers. Anyway, this examines both the past and the present of these 3 economic tigers in Asia. It's part travelogue, it's part history, it's part like modern day cultural study. And along the way, Booth speaks to historians, expats, content creators, film producers, and so on. And you'll get insight on past atrocities and how like the rape of Nanking or Japan's colonial rule over Korea continue to fuel mistrust. And ultimately, he's trying to find like a potential path forward to like kind of like heal these wounds, which I don't think he really succeeds at. But I have a few issues with the execution in this because it's a very scattershot approach. Like in the part about Korea, on one page, he's complaining about metal chopsticks because they're too slippery and make him look like a broob. The next page, he's saying like expensive cars get priority on the road, even though that didn't happen for him in his rented Kia. Really weird gripe. And then he's talking about how like public flatulence is just a thing people do in Korea, which like, hell yeah, to be honest. And then on the next page, he's like interviewing a film producer about their work. But I will say, Somito is a very good film, and Old Boy is an all-time favorite of mine. South Korean cinema is my jam, and look, he does sort of connect how it all plays into the overall economy in Asia, but still it felt like superfluous to me. It's not just how the book is structured into parts and cities with chronology thrown out the window. It's not just the bouncing around travelogue rants. The author goes even further in making it all very hectic and hard to pin down. So ultimately you get a very disjointed and shallow experience because we never really dig in on any one subject for too long. And while the author does admit his pro-Japanese bias in the outset coming into it, it still permeates through the book at some key points that really turned me off to the project as a whole. I gave this 2.5 stars. This would probably work better for you as a sampler platter if you like knew nothing of the subjects covered here, but I know enough to be dangerous, like not a whole lot, but enough to be dangerous, and it didn't work for me. This is a problem I have with owning over 1,000 books is I just had this in my hand earlier today and it took me like 5 minutes to find it. Anyway, as the bonus that I promised, I also read volumes 1 through 3 of Vagabond. I'm going to try to get that without the glare. I'm sorry if it continued to do it. I'm so bad at that. So Vagabond is essentially a Musashi retelling in manga form. I'm doing this as part of like my samurai immersion plan where I read Shogun, which I'm now well over halfway through. I'm about to finish it up in the next couple of days, hopefully. I detailed that whole immersion plan in a video. I included history books, manga like this one, animes, shows, movies, and so on. It's still early doors with this one, and I got to pick up the next set of 3 volumes. They didn't have it at the Books A Million when I went, but I'm really enjoying this story so far. The artwork is solid. I can see the groundwork being laid for some of these characters. I am sold on continuing is this central theme of what I'm getting at here, and I'll definitely have more to yap about when I get further into the series, because I do want to talk about mangas more. And right now, I'm in the middle of this like Death Note, Berserk. I even picked up the 2nd volume of Tokyo Ghoul Re, so I'm really going to have to like pick a lane and finish at least one of those soon. So we'll see when I get back to Vagabond, but yeah, for all the people that recommended it to me, it has been very solid at the outset. There's 7 books, 1 manga as a bonus, bunch of reviews. Again, I want to know the best book that you read in July, and I just appreciate you hanging out with me while I yap about books, and I will see you on the next one.